Final Fantasy. Few franchises in gaming are as iconic as the Final Fantasy franchise. Square Enix's most successful installment was Final Fantasy VII, and it was the first title that was easily accessible to Western audiences and exposed the world to JRPGs, and therefore has a very special place in many people's hearts. With that being said, I understand why a lot of people are having very strong feelings about the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake and are resistant to change. Also, many in general are just completely confused at what they just saw. I wanted to make this video to explain what I believe happened and why people should be losing their minds with excitement for future installments of the remake. Spoiler warning, if you are watching this video, I assume you've already played and beaten Final Fantasy VII Remake. If not, run for the hills. This will be full of spoilers. Now, bookmark the video, maybe give it a like so you can find more easily, and come back once you have finished the game. The ending to Final Fantasy VII Remake was, for lack of a better word, amazing. I cannot say to you how much I truly loved and enjoyed this game from start to finish. It was an incredible experience, and it opened the door to so much more in hopefully the not too distant future. Now, let me start off by saying no one knows exactly what happened at the end of this game. We only know what we were shown, and there are plenty of arguments, some weaker than others, that can poke holes in many of the theories out there. But just know that this is my interpretation of what happened based on replaying the game and the ending a few times now, knowing the lore of the previous Final Fantasy content and what was being said by characters such as Aerith, Red 13, and Sephiroth at the end of the game. Also, if there's one thing we all know about the game's director and concept designer Tetsuya Nomura, is that we never know anything until it's all over. So take everything with a grain of salt, because even if we hit the nail on the head with our interpretations, he could always easily wildcard change everything on us as early as the next installment. After a long chase sequence with helicopters, motorcyclists, trucks, and robots, the gang finally escapes after a long battle against Motorball, only to find themselves cut off at the end of the road by Sephiroth. After a short and broad conversation with Sephiroth about destiny, Sephiroth then provokes the Whispers, who in turn create a barrier surrounding Midgar, preventing anyone from leaving. More on the Whispers later. We then cut to a flashback of Zack Fair before his inevitable face-off against the Shinra Security Forces military just outside of Midgar. Now, for those of you who don't know the story of Final Fantasy VII or the lead-up content with Crisis Core, this probably confused a lot of people. Zack was a soldier first class, Cloud's friend and mentor, and also the one that Cloud gets the Buster Sword from after he eventually dies while protecting the two of them. Zack then gives his trademark speech to the Buster Sword about defending honor, both of which he got from his mentor Angeal before lunging headfirst at the Shinra military. This scene is almost identical to the end of Crisis Core, except you can see that the Whispers are present. We then snap back to the group and seemingly from Aerith's vision, which is strange because she was not present for Zack's death. It is unclear if everyone saw the same image or if it was just her. Now, the Watchmen of Fate, or as they become known as
Whispers,
or as Red 13 describes them as,
perhaps best described as arbiters of fate. They are drawn to those who attempt to alter destiny's course and ensure they do not. The flow of the great river that is the planet, from inception to oblivion.
and you're saying that that flow is somehow fixed?
Yes, for it is the will of the planet itself.
The Whispers are a manifestation of the planet to keep the original game story on its course. They intervene so many times throughout the remake in so many different ways. The Whispers drew Cloud's attention to Aerith in Sector 8, forcing a chance meeting between the two. The Whispers then injure Jesse's leg in the Sector 7 slums, thus forcing Barrett to bring Cloud along on the Reactor 5 bombing mission. Jesse even takes note of their strange and seemingly deliberate actions. In Aerith's church in the Sector 5 slums, the Whispers intervene, preventing Cloud from finishing off Reno, and then whisk them away to the back room, forcing them to find another way out just like in the original game. They then intervene a number of times, including preventing Aerith from falling and hurting herself, possibly being captured, to later forming a protective barrier so the Shinra soldiers couldn't take Aerith. Later, the Whispers prevent Cloud and Barret from being able to stop Rude from dropping the Sector 7 plate. Later on in the game, the Arbiters of Fate intervene, preventing Hojo from telling Cloud more about the truth of his past way before he was supposed to learn about it. In the original game, Cloud doesn't learn the truth about his past until much later in the story. The Whispers even do much more impressive things demonstrating their power. During the escape sequence, the Whispers hold up a falling overpass, keeping it from crushing the characters. They also prevent the Shinra hauler carrying Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and Red 13 from slamming into an exploding helicopter, most likely killing the entire group except for Cloud. Even more impressive than that, they tried unsuccessfully to protect Barret from Sephiroth in the president's office of Shinra HQ. And after failing to do so, they bring him back to life. The Arbiters of Fate do so much more throughout the story, trying to keep the original story intact. They also therefore act as a very cool metaphor for veteran fans and purists of the original game, trying to keep things as they were. Back to the present, in an act of desperation after being provoked by Sephiroth, the Whispers create the barrier to seemingly prevent the group from pursuing or even squaring off against him, thus trying to keep the timeline in order. Then Sephiroth effortlessly slices through the Arbiter's barrier as if mocking their attempts. Now, this barrier seemed to have been so powerful that it may have even broken through time, because we see it in the flashbacks with Zack Fair. And we know that these should be flashbacks because the events of Crisis Core took place before the main canon of Final Fantasy VII. So either this barrier was that powerful, or there was something else going on at the time of Zack's death. As of now, we do not have any additional facts. Sephiroth then baits Cloud to follow him, seemingly knowing exactly what he's doing and tempting the group to challenge their destiny that was the original story, and pursue him through the barrier. Aerith then opens her own portal, which she just randomly has the power to do. She has a lot of unexplained knowledge of everything that is going on, and it is suggested through interactions before and during these moments that it is because she is a Secher, or Ancient as the game most commonly refers to them as. Now, this is where things get super interesting. Sephiroth's actions here and more upcoming ones suggest that he knows exactly what is going on and what his future entails, almost as if he has time traveled or seen the future to know exactly what happens to him and how his plans to wipe out life on the planet are, at least through the actions of the original game, thwarted. Let's break down some of Sephiroth's backstory for those who don't know. Sephiroth, as we know, is a product of human testing with Jenova cells. Jenova is an alien that fell to Gaia on a meteorite and was found by Shinra scientists. When Sephiroth learned the truth of this, it caused him to go mad, and the once hero of Shinra decided to carry out his mother's omnicidal desires. It was then that he destroyed Cloud and Tifa's hometown of Nibelheim, killing basically everyone and injuring Zack and Tifa in the process. Tifa was trying to get revenge for her hometown and her family. And Zack trying to put a stop to Sephiroth. It was then that Cloud first picked up the Buster Sword and landed a lucky shot on an unsuspecting Sephiroth.
Cloud, finish Sephiroth off. Sephiroth!
It was then that Cloud used every last bit of rage and strength he had left to defeat an injured Sephiroth. Sephiroth then fell into the reactor and found his way into the life stream. Now, normally this would be the same as dying and finding the afterlife for most, but for Sephiroth became one with the life stream and thus found basically limitless power as long as the planet was alive. The life stream is described as the river of life that circles the planet, giving life to the world and everything in it. When someone or something dies, they return to the planet and the life stream. This is what Shinra was farming in their reactors and became known as Mako. With wiping out all life on Gaia, Sephiroth would become even more powerful. I should also mention that anytime the group fights Sephiroth, they are actually clones that he manifests, and they are only a fraction of his true power. Back to the ending and present events. After Aerith opens the portal to pursue Sephiroth, the group has a short conversation where they all come to terms with the fact that if they do in fact go after Sephiroth, they will be challenging and forever changing their destiny. Aerith recognizes the threat that Sephiroth is for the planet and seems to sense a future where the threat of Sephiroth is never truly gone. She expresses that this is something that they must do, and the group agrees.
Never tried to challenge destiny.
This could well be her last line of defense. It won't be easy.
After the group travels through the portal, the Arbiters of Fate call upon their last line of defense against those who would alter the future and Destiny's course. In this effort, they come together to become the Harbinger, which is a giant entity that attacks the party in an attempt to stop them. As a part of the fight, the Whispers form three main smaller entities that are connected to the Harbinger in order to fight the group. You see these three enemies form right in front of Cloud, Tifa, and Barret. Whisper Rubrum, which is red and fights with a sword. Whisper Kuroshio, which is yellow and fights with guns. And Whisper Viridi, which is green and fights with fists. Each of these whispers, when you assess them, say that they are, quote, an entity from a future timeline, end quote, and that they, quote, fight to protect the future that gave shape to it, end quote. These are clearly the Whispers' future manifestations of Cloud, Tifa, and Barret. The game clearly continues to have the characters and thus the players fight against their own understanding of the game. This is an awesome element and nod to future change. It is worth noting that it is strange that there is no Whisper version of Aerith or Red 13 to fight. If it was just Aerith, you could probably argue that it is because she dies at the hands of Sephiroth halfway through the original story. But with the absence of a Whisper entity for Red 13 as well, it's hard to put a finger on what the reasoning would be or if we are simply overthinking it. As the party defeats the Whispers, they continue to have premonitions of their futures if Destiny were to stay on its preordained course. Once all three entities are defeated individually, they come together to become a Whisper form of Bahamut. This is definitely a cool moment. There are 3 in the original game, as well as 1 in Advent Children. There are even 2 additional forms of Bahamut in Crisis Core, the prequel to Final Fantasy VII. Cloud keeps having visions of Aerith's death, which is definitely worth pointing out. After the party defeats the Whispers and the Harbinger, Sephiroth finally appears. Now, I have seen many reaction, analytical breakdown, and ending explained videos that say that he's appearing underneath his ultimate attack, Supernova, but I do not believe that to be true. For starters, when we see the tornadoes forming all over the screen, they are identical to the ones that we see as Meteor is about to strike Gaia at the end of Final Fantasy VII. Also, when Sephiroth took over the VR machine back in Chapter 16, we saw the same twisters appear as Meteor was about to land. We see many things that point to this being Meteor, though I will admit it does look an awful lot like Supernova. While Sephiroth is talking to the party underneath the illusion of Meteor, we see him absorb the Arbiters of Fate. Though there is no clear explanation to this, one would assume that this is him continuing to amass power as he has been doing while in the lifestream. After all, the whole reason he wanted Meteor to strike Gaia was to not only wipe out all life on the planet, but also to seriously wound the planet. He believed it would give him an opportunity to absorb the lifestream completely into himself, making him even more powerful. It is also worth noting that the Whispers at this point look an awful lot like the shadows flying around when he reappeared during the end of Advent Children. Crazy coincidence? Time will tell. Now, if it hadn't already, this is where the fight goes full Advent Children on us. Sephiroth attacks the party and Cloud starts performing feats of ability we really hadn't seen to this point. It could be that seeing their futures gave them more ability than they had before, or simply that fighting against Sephiroth brought it out. Cloud then faces off against Sephiroth in a multi-phase fight that has the two of them throwing each other all over the environment. It is worth noting that as the fight goes on, you get random allies in a random order that join you. Here we see Aerith first, but if you check my live stream on Twitch, I got Tifa first. Alright, let's go. Tifa! Somersault!
Need some help?
Don't know about me.
Desperately need is more like it.
Good to go?
After a long fight, the group finally prevails over Sephiroth, only to have Cloud pulled into an alternate dimension, where he then faces off against Sephiroth in a obvious nod to their final fight at the end of Final Fantasy VII. Sephiroth proceeds to ask Cloud to join him one last time, and Cloud refuses. The two then fight, and though Cloud puts up a good effort, Sephiroth is clearly just toying with him. And with Cloud not having tools like Omni Slash at his disposal, he really didn't have much of a chance. We snap back to Midgar and things seem to be back to normal. Rufus has taken over as president of Shinra, and Hojo seems really happy that Jenova was stolen and seemingly excited about the future. This is where things get a little trippy. We cut back to Zack after his battle with the Shinra military, and somehow he has survived. An important thing to point out is that a plastic bag with the Shinra dog logo stamp on it blows by in the wind. The game intentionally slows this down and shows us that the dog is different than the one we've seen a number of times throughout the game. It is unclear at this time if this indicates a different dimension, timeline, or if simply at some point between Crisis Core and Final Fantasy VII, Shinra decides to rebrand. But I doubt that the game would have made such a big deal about it if it wasn't important. Zack is then knocked down by an explosion of light and all the whispers disappear. We don't have any real answers as to what is happening here, but it is a safe assumption that it is something to do with Cloud and the gang defeating the Harbinger and Sephiroth in Destiny's Crossroads. Shards of light rain down over Midgar, and we find that Biggs also survived the Sector 7 plate collapse. What is interesting is that we also see Jessie's glove and possibly her headband on the table next to him. This is very strange because Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie all died in the plate collapse in the original game, and now it is possible that all three survived. It's also possible that it's simply her glove and that she is dead after all, but only time will tell. We then cut to the group who has appeared well outside of Midgar, and after some soul searching, they all agree that they have to stop Sephiroth, and they head out determined and with the purpose to find a way to stop him. This is where things get really interesting because what we assume is a flashback of Zack and Cloud brush shoulders with the group. It is very much unclear what this means, and we probably won't have any definitive answers anytime soon. The game then ends with the camera scrolling up into the sky where the words, quote, "The unknown journey will continue," end quote, appear, reminding us that going forward, anything and everything that happens is no longer scripted to the original canon of the game. This further sinks in the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake is not a ground-up remaster of the original, but a completely remade and arguably reimagined series. The interesting thing to remember, though, is that the characters have all seen glimpses of their future that would have been and are carrying those memories with them. Also, with the element of Sephiroth knowing the future and thus changing it, this isn't a true reboot. This is more like Final Fantasy VII 1.5 or even 2.0. The narrative and story are continuing, possibly from Advent Children. So basically, if all this turns out to be true, Remake is actually a sequel. I know purists out there are going to be up in arms, but if you look at this for what it is, I can't help but get excited to see where the world of Final Fantasy VII goes from here. What plot points from the original are going to pop up? What new events will happen? What potential new characters will be there? Will certain characters survive? Will other ones surprisingly perish? It is now a world of unknowns, and we can all jump into the next game with anticipation of a new story that continues the old one we all grew up with. So, I think that is about as complete of a breakdown and explanation of the ending as I can get with the information we currently have. So, what were your thoughts, everyone? If you loved it, hated it, or indifferent, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the video. Also, remember that I stream on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week. Link in the description down below. I know that I am truly excited for what the future holds for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I look forward to bringing you a lot more content like this one in the future. Until next time, everybody. Every damn time, every single time I've ever seen that animation, I get freaking goosebumps.